Have you ever had your personal and professional worlds collide? Today, on the show, I'm excited to bring on fellow OT podcaster, Mandy Chamberlain from Seniors Flourish, and she shares with us her own personal experience of an unexpected accident and how that had a drastic impact on her professional role as an occupational therapy provider. If you're interested in occupational therapy, this is the place for you. This show aims to explore our profession by sharing who we are and what we do. Because for us, occupational therapy is more than just a job. Hi, I'm Sarah. Welcome to OT for Life. Welcome to the show today, Mandy. W's it going?
Oh, I'm great.
So let's back up a little bit. And it was about 13 years ago. And at this point, you were still a pretty new therapist, maybe a year or 2 years into practice. And you made a phone call to your brother. Tell me what happened. What happened next?
So about 13 years ago, I was randomly calling my brother just to see what was up, like what's going on. And he answered the phone and he was hysterical, like panicking, crying, freaking out. And I remember thinking like, what the heck? Like at first I thought he was kind of laughing. Like I was like, like this surreal, like I remember this day like it was yesterday. I was in my living room, this whole thing. And he was just saying that our sister had a car accident. He's like, she's at the hospital. Mom and dad are going, trying to figure it all out. I'm like, okay, well, this could mean a lot of things. Like we're not freaking out. And so, I tried to call my parents because like nobody called me. And I remember thinking like, okay, she's in this, he said it was a major accident and nobody's calling me. And so let me back up. My whole entire family is in North Dakota. And I'm at the time still living in Colorado. So obviously there's a distance. And come to find out, she was in a car accident. It was her first year of college and she was living at home for the summer. So Lindsay was coming home from the gym after some classes and she was texting while driving and she ran a red light and she hit a gravel truck like on the corner. So basically what happened is she hit, counter coup injury, but then because she was trying to avoid it, hit the corner of the bumper and spun around and hit again. So it was like this huge diffuse axonal injury. And the whole thing, it was just like this, like it's a surreal, crazy experience where the car caught on fire, the fire department came and the ambulance and everyone came. So my parents live outside of Fargo area in a small town, but still living in a community in a city for your entire life. My parents knew people on the EMS that were there. They knew some of the firefighters. And it was just like this huge, crazy thing because they contacted my parents before my parents heard it from the hospital because it was just, everyone just knows each other. It's like, it's just kind of the way it is. So they came in and I'm like far away. I don't really know what the heck is going on. And my parents are like, you need to get here. And I'd only been a therapist a couple of years, and they were just like, I don't know if she's going to make it and things like that. And then I was like freaking out. So got there and I mean, it was grim. Like, it was not looking good. She had brain swelling, of course. She Rancho scale of like 1. It was just really bad. And like, 1 minute, of course, they would be like, okay, she's going to make it. And the next minute she's not going to make it. But she is a fighter. My gosh, they really didn't expect her to live. They thought she'd be vegetative. And so it's like the whole conversations about like, do we, pull life support? Do we not? And part of my family was like, this isn't quality of life. Yes, we should pull it. And my parents were just like, no, we're not going to do that. But the doctor was saying she was going to be vegetative, which is, as we know, as healthcare professionals or working in neuro or with acquired brain injury, like you don't really know what that's going to look like. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to give so much information at the beginning, right, to educate us. But all my parents heard was, the doctor was like, we won't know rehab potential for at least a year. And they're like, a year? A year?
A minute seems long right now.
And I was like, they're saying so many other things, but that's all they could hear and that's all they could focus on. And the amount of stress was out of control, of course. They were going through all the levels of grief at that time, even though she, was alive and is alive. So I was in it, but it's not my child. I'm a sister, but I also like know almost too much in a weird way about how this whole thing works. And so the other thing that was really weird, my last field work was in an outpatient acquired brain injury center. And so it was my favorite. And actually neuro has always been one of my ultimate populations to work with. And I was like, I was convinced when I was in that field work, that's where I wanted to work. That type of setting. It was amazing. We got to do cognition. We got to do physical, limitations. We got to see them twice a day. I mean, like probably doesn't work that way now, but like, it was just, I loved it. I loved it. So like I had also that experience, and it's kind of like, was like my passion area of OT as well. So I was there, I think for like a month, like in North Dakota with my family. And then I was like, I have a job. Like,
okay, I want to cut you off because I want to get into
there's
all
probably
of
so
that.
many things. So I could just keep talking.
I know.
Yes.
I'm like, I want to back up a little bit before we get into kind of the rehab and that whole process.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
So you had some experiences, and I'm so glad that you said that, because I was like, I was curious because I know that you've always working with older adults and you've had that experience, but I wasn't quite sure if you had any experience with brain injuries and that neuro side of it. And so it sounded like you had at least a field work in there and had a really profound interest in that area. Mm-hmm. So you had a working kind of knowledge and experience with that population. And now you are going through it as a sister and as a family member. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to know a little bit more about your like the emotional side of that. Because I know you said when you first got the call, you were like, wait, what's going on? Like, is this even real? And then it was like, you mentioned it was a roller coaster. When did it actually dawn on you like, oh, this could be worse than I originally thought? Like, just kind of walk us through that emotional piece that you were dealing with.
Yeah, I finally had talked to my parents, and I remember them saying like, it's bad. Like, you need to come. They're going to remove part of her skull, to reduce the swelling. But the thing about it is like, they would be like, oh, she has a trach. Of course, he wouldn't say trach, but they were going through all the stuff, telling me all these things. And I'm just like, oh crap. Because I'm very realistic, and I'm like, this is so not good. Like that's actually what I remember feeling at first. And then I was just like devastated, because I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, and it sounds really crazy, but I just started thinking about the impact of her life and what she has ahead of her. Because my parents like had no idea. Like they don't really know. And it was super frustrating for me on so many levels. It's because they were doing, of course, like MRIs and scans and things like that. Because externally, she had bruising things, but she didn't have any broken bones or anything like that. It was all spasticity and obviously cognitive deficits. So it was like, I had this like kind of split personality of like being like, oh my gosh, it's my sister. I'm devastated. And then being like, okay, super, like, I don't know if that was probably my way of coping, is like being like super practical. I mean, like, okay, what do we need to do now? Like right now, what is it that we need to do or can we do right now? So I went to all like the care conferences and everything, because part of me really believes in obviously giving them information, right? Like giving them like, this is what an acquired brain injury is. This is what it looks like. This is some of the symptomology. This is kind of some expectations. But as we know, working with people who have neurological problems or dysfunction or acquired, we don't always know what that's going to look like at the end. And so that's what they were craving. They wanted to know what would happen, and nobody had those answers. And that was obviously super frustrating to them. And it was really frustrating to me that they didn't understand that at the time. I'm older and more mature, and I can kind of see that more now. I just wanted to help so much, but it was hard because I was just a kid. Even though I was like 24 or 25 years old, like they still just saw me as their kid. And so at the beginning, I really just wanted to help, because they would, say things that they'd hear and they'd filter it because of all the stuff that's going on. And I'd be like, well, no, let's just worry about what's going on now. She's going to get a spasticity splint and they're going to do this with her. And they wanted my opinion, but they didn't want my opinion at all. And so it was a really hard place to be, because it caused a lot of tension, because I'd be like, I said, you just need to talk to the doctor. You need to talk to a therapist. But they wanted my opinion because they knew I knew enough, but they didn't want my opinion because I'm their kid and I'm not working with her. And I'm like, okay, so it was really hard for me to like find my role in that. And so then I kind of got to a point where I just was like, I can't be that role. Like you want that role, but you don't want that role. But it was also hard for me to like step away from that role because my mind is also newly trained and excited about the profession. And then it got to the point where it was just really hard because it's like I wanted to be supportive and that's what my ultimate goal was. But also like it was hard for me to turn off that OT cap. So I would just be a sister, just be supportive, like help with therapy, go to therapy with her, or help with X, Y, and Z. But then I really wouldn't say anything. Like I wouldn't say my opinion because I knew it was just making things worse in a way. But then it was like this, I was in this weird limbo zone.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that's a really important thing to highlight. Because I think anybody that has been a therapist and has gone through anything, whether it is a traumatic brain injury with a family member or something that has happened that's been traumatic, I think we all go through that where we know too much. We can look up what we don't know and do the research.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And then you put your own kind of projections on it of, oh, well, we need to be doing this, or hold on, let me explain this to you guys. Like, you don't understand it or anything like that. And really, I like finding that balance between being the support, being there for your family, being there for your sister, being there for everybody, but also having that OT brain that literally is just like hovering over you.
It's
like,
so hard.
Hey, I'm here.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's finding your role. And that's why like I'm and that really did change how I looked at family dynamics as a practitioner my entire career. And just kind of like turning that role off a little bit. One is emotionally was really hard for me, but also it's because I had to actually set like a healthy boundary and be like, hey, I'm really having a hard time. But then it was always like, I really felt like I'm not trying to make this about me because it's not about me at all. But I also was like, okay, I know you want my opinion, but you don't actually listen to my opinion. And that was really hard because my sister at the time was 19. So my parents were still in full on parent mode. And then this happened to their baby. Then it's exemplified 100%. Like you do everything. You're mama bear, right? I get that. But also I was like, they don't want to have to deal with this extra stress between their other kids because it's me and then I have a brother and then my sister that had that accident, 5 years younger than me, and then I have a sister that's almost 10 years younger than, so there's 4 of us. So I was like, I can't have you ask me and then not listen or get mad or think I'm being a Debbie Downer, and then that was a challenging relationship for us. And it wasn't even about me, because they just want to do everything they can for their kid. And I get that. But it was like this weird family dynamic that was created out of this moment. And that's just the way life is. And that's the way so many other families are dealing with it. Like, I think sometimes we really do focus on the patient. Not that I don't think that we look at the whole family dynamic, but here's an example. I remember working in home because at the time I was working in home health. And this was probably a couple of years after my sister's accident. But there was a family where they had a teenage daughter and the dad had a stroke. And there was a lot of expectations for that daughter to take care of the dad. And she was, I think, 14 or 15, and there was like this really struggle with the role. Like, what does the daughter want? Like, what kind of role does she want to have? Because some people are like, I'll do anything. I'll take on every role. And that's my mom, because my mom is a freaking gem. Like, she sold her business. She started helping my sister full time. And like, that is who she is. Like, it will just do anything and just carry on because she is seriously amazing. I don't know if I could have done that. Like, I don't know if I could have, I think I would have wanted more external supports to help me, but she didn't. And that's who she is. But I guess getting back to the story about the teenager, like the family wanted her to be a caregiver. And she just wanted to be a kid dealing with the situation with her father. And so it's like, I really looked at that differently, just about what the roles are in the families and what they want to be, and me not having that expectation of saying like, I don't understand why they can't help with showers every day. They're there. Right.
Right.
But that's not the role that they want in their lives. And sometimes that expectation that causes a lot of stress. And so like, I really didn't I mean, it's those things that you kind of know as a therapist, but like it really just put it in perspective for me. And that became a really huge part of my practice in general, just really looking at how that family dynamic in the environment, and even if they're not directly there, what that role is. And I think sometimes it's important to actually talk about, just because, you have a spouse there, that one, the expectation that's the role they want to take is take care of them. But like, what is is there any other like family members that are involved in looking at it bigger? Because it's like a drop of water with the ripple effect. It doesn't matter what that is. And you're like, there's always a dynamic there that I think it's really important that we look at, because we know the context and the environment and the family make a huge difference and impact, rehab outcomes. But it's really challenging as a family member, even if I wasn't directly there all the time. And I remember having like kind of like these feeling like why should I feel so not involved isn't the right word, but like I was worried that it was about me, and I knew it wasn't about me. But I felt it. Like I felt the stress of the family.
Do you feel like it was because you knew about this process and you knew about rehab and you knew about brain injuries and you had this information that you put pressure on yourself because you felt like you had to then share that with everybody because that wasn't really what they had experience with thus far? Or like, where do you think that pressure came from?
I think it's just who I am in a bit. I am a caring, giving person, because everyone experiences this differently where you are in life. My brother experienced it very differently than I did. My youngest sister was like 14 at the time. That's a really terrible time to have a big family traumatic event. Everyone's going to experience it differently based upon your own personality and education and life and role in the family. And I don't think it's like cookie cutter like that. For me, it was really, I think it's just, I don't know, I boil it down to like in a weird way, knowing a little too much about it. I feel like sometimes I remember feeling like I wish I didn't know as much about this because then you can kind of remove yourself a little bit. I don't know how to really kind of explain it. It was just super, it was really probably some of the hardest years for me. And I didn't even go through it. And those are the things I find challenging. So she ended up going to this rehab hospital in Minneapolis, and they, it was supposed to be like this, stimulation program. So what I thought of a stimulation program is not what they were providing. And that caused some stress because I was not very, I was very direct with it. I'm like, okay, like, what is this stimulation program? I mean, they had her up and down in the chair.
Here, guys.
Yeah, I kind of need to know, what is up. I was just like, come on. Yeah. So they did, they got her up in the chair regularly and down, it's part of it. Right. But then there was cause she was really low cognitive level. So I'm shaving her legs. I'm bringing her lotion in. I didn't know enough, but I knew enough to let's get some music going. I remember my brother and I having a dance party in her room because we're cracking out some really bad 90s rap and trying to you know what I mean? Create, these are the things she loves. And, I'd be shaving her legs. My mom's why are you shaving her legs? I'm because she would be devastated if she knew that her legs were this hairy in public. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I was trying to, do some of those things and kind of having a conflict with some of the other healthcare team because they were supposed to be on the schedule and they weren't. And then I'd be on it because I know that's part of it. But, then she started kind of going up in cognitive levels. But then things my parents would be oh, her eyes are open. I'd be oh my gosh, that's amazing because we're stepping up, we're moving forward. But then it would be things that I would just be oh, I don't know what to say. Okay, here's an example. She got to a point where she would put fingers up 1 and 2 for yes and no. Great. But they would ask non-concrete questions. They'd be do you like this blanket? Yes or no? I'm so then they were she can, she knows what we're saying. But I'm well, those aren't really, you should say are your eyes blue or brown or blue or brown? You know what I mean?
Right.
They were kind of I felt really grasping because you're grasping for anything that you see. And so I would just be that's awesome. But in my mind, I'd be like in my brain, my OT brain's like, it's cringing, like, oh, okay. I'm like, because it is awesome that she's progressing. So it was just like those kinds of things. I just knew I had to just shut up because I didn't want to like bring the party down because she was doing great.
I'm finding this just really interesting because not only were you kind of figuring out the balance with your family, but then also figuring out this balance within the healthcare system, within the team and the rehab specialists and everybody, like the healthcare aspect of it too, of like, oh, well, I'm sure you're sitting there like, I would have done it this way, or, okay, that's great, but let's move on. Like, let's keep going. And so you're like really trying to figure out your place in like these two different dynamics and like really just trying to figure out that like perfect spot of where you can be the most helpful and also be able to like utilize the information that you have, but then also be there to be supportive. And I mean, literally just kind of figuring out where you specifically could fit in.
Yeah. I didn't really know what to do with myself. And it was just really awkward, to be honest. So she was at the rehab hospital for a few months. She went back to live with my parents. And so I remember having a conversation with some girlfriends and being like, okay, I'm going to go back. Because she had just transitioned to home and then she was going to outpatient therapy. But she was, her endurance was so poor. She was wiped out. It's like 25-minute drive to go to the outpatient center. And I was like, have you guys thought about home health? Because she'd qualified. And they'd be like, oh no, we don't have the stuff for it, and as a home health therapist, I was like, oh my gosh, you could do a billion things, but I didn't say that. But like, those are the things I'm just like, it's not me, but it was it was a mind shift and it was really challenging for me. And, I was early in my career and super excited about the profession and everything that we can do and provide. And I just was like, you're not taking advantage. I didn't say that because, like I had said that we had to have this role delineation a bit, but like her therapists were great. Like they would call me. I'd be in on when you're talking about cases and things like that. They let me call in. I think they did figure out that I wanted to be involved. They also, I remember her OT in particular calling me and because they were talking about getting her a wheelchair. Okay. So she needs power mobility. She still uses power mobility. And at the time, my parents were very, very, very against it. And just because, they felt like, oh, how is she supposed to exercise her legs? Like those things that you hear. And, like I know that wheelchair is not for exercise. A wheelchair is for independence and mobility. And if you want to exercise your legs, you can do that 100 different ways. I remember my parents and the therapist having a clash and the therapist calling me, and it was really kind of cool. Like I actually remember this conversation really clearly because I was in my car and I remember like she kind of first started out saying like she kind of really wanted to know where I was. And I remember thinking like where are you in this whole, like dynamic? And I remember thinking like, what is she asking? What is she trying to figure out? I think she wanted to figure out if I had my OT cap on or my family cap on. And I remember because she wanted me to have a conversation with my parents about like the wheelchair thing. And I remember this conversation and it was kind of one of those things you're like, oh, that is really cool. Because one, asking my opinion felt really good because I felt like it was kind of bashed down a bit. But also I really felt like she really was looking at the whole family unit and really looking at where I was. And I don't think she was trying to force me to have an opinion either way. And I remember saying like, I want what's best for her. I want what works and where my family's comfortable, but like, I can't like have a true opinion on that. And so like, I think, looking from an outsider's view, but not even a true outsider, a family member's view, like this amount of stress and stuff that they went through was so insane. And the amount of support and like a ride or die situation, like that's what you want out of that kind of situation that we don't always experience or see as a therapist. And that is so amazing to me. You know what I mean? Like they are they're still so supportive of her. And I'll talk about where she is now, whenever we kind of get to that. But it was like this crazy experience, but it was such a neat also that I got to see it from a different way and kind of like putting the rose-colored lens on it. Like it really changed how I looked at healthcare. I got to see it from a different perspective, because sometimes I feel like I'm doing such a great job. I'm doing my best, and there's stresses, but I'm providing such awesome care to my clients. And then sometimes when you're not in that situation from healthcare, you're like you advocate. You're like, this doesn't have to be this way because I know it can be great. You know what I mean? It's like this crazy kind of thing. But it really did shape the whole OT experience for me, which is crazy because I was already an OT.
Yeah. But it happened, I mean, pretty much right at the beginning of like kind of those pivotal years where you're literally just starting to like get in and figure it out, right? Like we get so much experience in school and we read about it and we're ready to like hit the ground running. But I feel like really that first 3 to 5 years of practice, like that's where everything's starting to solidify. And to go through this from the family perspective while you're also like just kind of getting your feet wet as a therapist, I can only imagine how immensely helpful that was for you to really stop to reflect on your own values, your own therapeutic use of self, and how you as a therapist operate. Oh gosh, yeah. Like
it's so crazy because I do think if it happened now, I would have such a different perspective. I'd still think there would be a lot of the same challenges, but it's just what experience gives you. You know what I mean? Like it just would be very different. And I do think about that randomly sometimes because, maybe I 100% say like, I did not handle every situation like correctly or the way sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, like live and learn a bit. Right. But also like, you don't know what you don't know. But it was a really, really a huge period of turmoil for me as a professional, a daughter, as a sister, as a family member. Because even like the dynamic between like me and the rest of my siblings, changes, and trying to figure out where that is. Because also, I mean, for me personally at 24, I mean, I just had got married and I'd moved to a new state. I mean, there was a lot of like a big transition period anyway. And then I lived this, I don't even know, 1,100 miles away. And then it's like, okay, then you question, should I move back? Or like, is that helpful? Is that even worth it? Is it like, should I do that as a family member? Like, is that expected of me? And so just trying to navigate some of those things from a personal standpoint versus a professional standpoint is really hard.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like every day, every minute was just kind of this learning opportunity for you to figure out how to be supportive, but also how to utilize what you do know. But ultimately, I mean, it was what was best for your sister and best for your family. And like, I know that you kept saying like, you felt like it was about you because you're experiencing it, you're going through it. But like, I mean, it's really figuring it out how it works best for everybody. And I love how you said that whole like ripple effect, because not only was it you and your parents and your other sister and your brother and that whole family dynamic, but then you just said you got married. Like you had just gotten married and you had this whole other life that you were just kind of moving into. And I'm sure it had an influence on that too. So it just kind of
100%
affected everything across the board.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a kind of obviously I keep saying it's crazy because it does feel like someone else's life in a weird way. And, like my view of people with disabilities is I just see people as being able to thrive, right? And having different needs than, in those types of things. And so like the view of people with disabilities is very different than like the rest of my family. Not the rest of my family per se, but like just the perception. Like my parents had never had any experience of working with or being around or having family members with any kind of disability. I got into OT originally because my grandfather had a stroke. So that was probably the most that they've experienced, but he lived and moved into a nursing home. And so also he's older, so it's kind of seen very differently. You know what I mean? And so it's in some ways it's really cool because my mom and dad, they advocate much more for other people, not in like outward ways, but just like the everyday things. I love that they maybe wouldn't have done because they didn't have that experience. So that's super cool. Like, you know what I mean? And I mean, like I said, they are the most devoted, supportive, and gems of people. Like it's amazing. Like that's always been my little bit of a conflict because like I know that not all families will do that or can do that. And look at it. Mine did. And that creates such a cool like family unit as well. Do you know what I mean? Like in amongst the stress, it caused some things that are really hard. And then other things that it's just like, you look at it from a bigger perspective and like the devotion is insanely amazing and beautiful.
But I think like going back to what you had said kind of towards the beginning of the conversation of talking about the awareness of what the family members are going through, not just our clients. Like we talk about being client-centered and that's drilled into us. And I think we as OTs, we do a brilliant job of that. But a lot of times recognizing the awareness of what is going on with the family, that's the part that can always be improved upon because your family sounds like it was just amazing and your mom dropped everything to be there for your sister. But some families can't do that.
No.
Financially, they can't do that. Or role-wise, they like literally they can't even take on that emotional responsibility to do that. And we as OTs have to be able to recognize what's going on with the families that we're working with and then be able to adjust to that. Where you have a family that is so supportive and maybe where you have a family that isn't as supportive, or maybe they're grieving in their own sense. So they're not even there to be able to kind of take it in and to listen to what you have to say. And I think being able to identify and then adjust and really try to just work together with that family is so, so important for us as therapists to really kind of always kind of have in our brain and in our back pocket.
Yeah, no. And you know, like the thing about it is like, so there was a lot of information given to us, right? Like we want, like as therapists, I know you're like, education is power. Like this is what a, ABI looks like. And this is what, so that is good. But being able to say, like, if it's not something that we can address as a family dynamic, making sure that we're doing appropriate referrals. Like we didn't have a social worker involved, which I don't know why, like looking back, or if because I remember saying like maybe some kind of like support group. And it all depends on the city and town and things that you're in, right? Because like, like maybe a family support group would have been really helpful. And they're definitely more now than there was like almost 15 years ago. It's really kind of evolved. And I think there's definitely more awareness on how that ripple effect, how it just is. And it's also interesting because so my sister moved in with my parents and they lived in a small town and like there was really limited, they had support, like they were really involved in their church and a lot of community support. But even from like my mom, like people are very, very amazingly supportive at the beginning. And then it trickles down. And that's like, you can look at the research, it's just a thing. And I get that because also like my mom didn't have time or energy to like make connections with their friends, to be like, hey, let's just go to dinner once in a while.
Right.
And so that rule for her was also very different. She, sold her business and, her closest friends are still there and amazing. But like, that support, you have so much support at the beginning and you feel like, okay, you're rallied around, and then it just kind of dwindles and that's natural. And then, even for my sister, like she would be like, I don't really know other people like me. Right. And so she ended up moving into a supported apartment setting eventually. And then, so most of them I'd say were older adults, which she has a love for as well. But there was a couple younger people with not maybe ABIs, but like different types of where they might need just some support. So she had some friends, through that as well. But I'd be like, hey, how about like a group, like an ABI group or some kind of group? And, like trying for me to accept something like, I'm not like them. I'm not like, quote, those people. I'd be like, oh, okay. I think it'd be awesome. Or like adaptive sports. Like she really was she wasn't like super sporty, but I'm like, oh, it'd be fun. But just knowing like, personality changes, right? And like things that you're like, you would have loved that, but now she doesn't. So like just trying to kind of like increase awareness and support. And some of those things are nothing that I can do. But I guess getting back to what you were talking about of us just being aware of how these, even surgeries, cancer, acquired disease process is a different situation. And I'm not saying less stressful, it's different than somebody who's grown up with a disability their entire life and the family's adjusted throughout their lifespan. Having an acute spinal cord injury or ABI or these things that are traumatic that change the life roles, I personally believe it's just different. And I think just being aware of that and sensitive to that. And like I said, if we don't address that, making sure that they have resources or maybe connecting with organizations or, and actually, like helping them through that process. We can do that as OT practitioners. And so I think just kind of putting that and looking at it from that lens is really helpful. It's really helpful for the family. It's really helpful as a practitioner to be a more holistic therapist.
So you might have already answered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway and just see if there's more or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what advice do you have for therapists that are working with people and their caregivers who have experienced a brain injury?
I don't know if I'm very helpful or insightful. I think the big thing is just like, listen, like I say that probably all the time in my podcast as well. Like you have to listen to understand, not listen to like know the answer. That's not a direct quote. And there is actually a way better way to say that. But that's kind of always what I go back to. Because sometimes, you're seeing a client and a client may say haphazardly, just make a comment about their spouse not being helpful or something. And those are things you have to pick up on and look at how those roles and that dynamic influence rehab outcomes 100%. If they don't have that support, okay, we have to work with that and look at is there other ways that we can support? Do we have to work harder on certain things that we probably wouldn't? Yeah, of course, right? But really listening to them and seeing what their needs are. And also, I will have to say sometimes what the clients think they need or see as a need and what the caregivers see or need are two different things. And so just like listening to that. I mean, I could think of 100 examples over the years. I had a client that had a seizure and he was like in his late 50s, first time, definitely personality changes, cognitive changes. And, he'd be like, everything, it's fine or whatever. And the wife is like in the corner, feeling, just like looking stressed and dying, right? She's just like, it's, their personality is different. The confrontation, the awareness isn't there. So obviously client-centered, but also really trying to get a good feel of what's sometimes actually happening or what is the dynamic that we maybe need to work with or see where we fit or refer or assist. So that's what I would say. It's just really, it's literally down to the core of OT and listening, using your therapeutic use of self and listen is just crazy. And this is the thing, like, I don't necessarily think that when our experience that people weren't necessarily listening, it was just really overwhelming. And I personally don't feel like the resources that would have been helpful were suggested. And when you're in the middle of that, to go say to someone to say, oh, go reach out to blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's the last thing on my mind. You don't see that as a priority sometimes.
Well, and I think that's beautiful of just saying, listen, because it's so important. And especially I'm thinking like working in a hospital where it's a busy environment and you're an OT and you're running around and you have 15 clients that you have to see that day and you have productivity demands and
totally
documentation that's piling up behind you and you have your boss is breathing down your neck because you have to get this done and this done. Mm-hmm. And here you are, you're running into a room and now you have to stop and put all of that aside and be in that moment to be there for that client and their family. And I think very often it's very easy for us to just get caught up in everything that we're doing. And you just want to rush through and, okay, well, I deal with this all day. Great. Like, it's another patient. And to really stop and think and listen is brilliant advice.
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard on both sides. It's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But important.
Yeah.
But important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another question.
Yes.
This one's going to be for the caregivers. So going through it as a caregiver, what advice do you have for somebody that is going through something like this right now, or maybe potentially down the road might go through it? And just based on kind of your own experience, what did you find that helped you, or just any sort of tidbit of knowledge that you have?
Not being a direct caregiver even, right? I think finding other people that have experienced that would be really helpful. I mean, even, like I said, I really think it would have been helpful for my parents to have like, because you feel like no one gets it because they kind of don't, like, not because they were not trying or not trying to be supportive, but trying to find some people that you can just like vent a bit with, and like they sort of understand, I think would be huge. And also it's like trying to do some things for yourself sometimes, which we all know is hard, and all know it's like easier said than done. And yes, Mandy, I know, but it is.
I'm shaking my head. I know.
Yeah, I do. It's I'm like telling myself this, and for very different reasons, but like, it's just like, it's true. Like, you can only do that. You can only give so much when your cup is empty. We've heard that before.
Yep.
And I'm a little bit like, okay, a little cliche, but it's true. It is true. And I think that looks different for everyone. It's not like, oh, just go take a bath and give yourself an hour. No, like, you have to figure out what feeds your soul and what fills your cup. And that could be 100 things. So when you have friends that are saying like, just get out of the house, and you're like, okay, I know you're trying to be helpful, but that actually doesn't do anything for me. Like, I gotta find what works for me. But that's what your friends do. They're just like, I'll take care of it. You go. But that, it's like trying to figure out what that is. And sometimes like things that you think you need to fill your cup and what actually is true are two different things. So
yep.
It's so challenging, but that's kind of what I would say from a caregiver standpoint. I mean, like I said, I've worked with older adults most of my career in some capacity, outpatient, inpatient, acute care, home health, and it's the same challenges across the board. But yeah, it's tricky because when you're in it, that's not what you feel like you need to give. But looking back, you're like, oh, that's what I needed.
Yeah. I think that's a very valid point to make, because, right? What's the quote? Hindsight is 20/20.
Yeah, that's exactly
reflect
right.
Back.
You're way better with quotes than me. No, but it's so true.
One.
Fine, take it.
Yeah. But like, yeah, it's so easy to sit back and now reflect on it. But when you're going through it, there's so much that you are processing, you're learning, you are trying to figure out, you are just kind of grappling with and just processing in your head. So it's very easy to say, I should have done that. But during the time, it's much, much harder.
Yeah. And when you're in it, it's like, you're like, that is not a priority. I have to take care of my family first, or I need to do, and I
don't have time for that.
I don't have time for that because like everything else is way more important. And you see that, but then there's a burnout factor and there's so many things with it, but yeah.
Yeah. So I know you had kind of been talking a little bit about a few things about where your sister is, but I don't know if that's where she is currently. So maybe you can share kind of currently how she's doing.
Oh, yes. Okay. So she, after the whole kind of like years of, therapy and things like that, she, moved in with my parents full time, and she lived with them for a few years. And so at the time she was going to school for pre-optometry. So, she's a smart cookie. She's still a smart cookie, but that is not what she could do. She does have, so she uses a scooter to get around. She has essential tremor throughout her body, which is really probably the biggest challenge because so she can walk like on a treadmill, if she's holding on, but like any kind of like U-step or any kind of walker or something doesn't work. So she's those people that has like the scariest transfers in the whole wide world. You're like, oh God. And we laugh about it. We joke about it. It's like this whole thing. I'm like, she's like, are you ready? And I'm like, yes, because I don't see her all the time. So I'm always like, still, I'm like,
you're doing like the looking between your fingers.
Go girl. Go girl. You can do it. So she lived with my parents for a few years and then got to a point where, so she decided to go back to college because that's what she wanted to do. And it took her 8 years. But she has a degree in gerontology. So
awesome.
So amazing. And so she works and mainly volunteers at like nursing homes and things like that. And it's kind of her outlet as she loves that. And then, so now she lives in an apartment by herself, and she has aides come in 3 times a day because she can't cook because of her tremors really bad. And so she has someone come in 3 times a day to help with cooking essentially, and setting up meals, because even meal prep, like using the microwave is really hard, and like don't get me wrong, I tried not to get involved, but I really was like, oh, can we set this up? But whatever, they have their system. And so they come in 3 times a day and then help like with showering, standby assist for showering, because she can do that. And she volunteers a few times a week. She has somebody that she works with like at the local YMCA and swims a couple times a week. And so she has her routines that work for her and lives on her own. Has her 2 dogs that are a pain in my butt, but she loves them. And it's to go from someone saying that she's going to be in a vegetative state to should we remove life support and all the controversy and discussion and quality of life over that to where she is today and like thriving and happy. It just puts such a spin on life. You know what I mean? Because what you think you would accept as a person is not always the case. So like someone would be like, oh, I just couldn't live with myself having a brain injury or having a spinal cord injury, or what you think your life would be like because you're comparing it to what you are is not always the case. Is not always what I actually honestly, my sister Lindsay and I have had this, like, I think she would have been that person, been like, I would never want to live, like pull the plug, do the whole thing. But she lives a full, successful, loving life. You know what I mean? And so it's hard, kind of messes with your brain a bit and like looking at what life is. And yeah, I mean, like she's still hilarious like, and like has fun and like just is part of the family. It just looks different. And we've all had to adjust over the years on what that looks like because, there's personality changes, of course. And from my personal, not just personal, like personal experience, but like professional experience, I have this like somewhat theory, and maybe I should do some research before I start throwing out theories on a podcast.
Hypothesis here. Hypothesis.
Oh, see, good. I do think that there is a level of control when people don't get that taken away that they really crave. Like I've worked with some people who have had really high level, spinal, not everybody, but spinal cord injuries. And it turns into like, I don't want my hand here. I want my hand here. I want it this way. I want it this way. And I get it. Like I see that like so many things, if it's on a conscious level or not, because I don't think it's like, oh, I'm going to be control this situation or different things like that. But I guess what I'm saying is like, it just is a lifestyle change for everyone. Not even just about that, just, like now we're dealing with wheelchairs and now we're dealing with plane rides to come visit your sister in Colorado. Like, how does that look like? Because airlines are not the most accommodating. I mean, they say they are, but it is not easy. Bless my mother. like, oh, we'll have a chair ready for her. And then it doesn't happen, and it's like, trying to advocate and trying to be proactive because what they say and what actually happens are different things. And like, it just changes, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not bad. It's just different. And so like, I just think embracing that, and my family really has embraced that, is so not always the case for one, and just so cool. like, we can like joke about it now. Like, it's just part of, she can joke about it. We can joke about it. I'll be like, oh my gosh, Lindsay, if you have one more scary transfer to that toilet, she'd be like, I know. I'm like, I can't even watch you. She's like, go in the other room. I'm like, fine. Like stuff like that, right? Like you kind of have to just embrace it. That other people would be like, oh, I'm not going to say anything that would be kind of inappropriate. But like when you work in rehab, that's part of the reason why they embrace the rehab process. It can be fun. It can be challenging, but like people kind of treat you normal. Like they're not like tiptoeing because you have a wheelchair or tiptoeing because your processing speed is a little slow. And then you're like, do they understand what I'm saying? Like I can still harass her and she harasses me over sister things. Other people would be like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. But like, she's my sister. Like, yeah. It's just who we are. And so,
shouldn't you take transfers more seriously? I mean, come on.
Yeah. Are you harassing me because it took me 3 minutes to process? I'm like, but it's how, I don't know if it's probably our coping mechanism, but it's also who we are. Like, that's just how we've always been. And so it's cool that we can still be ourselves and still adjust and still be a family,
Mm-hmm. All right. I know we got to kind of start wrapping it up here. You've shared so much. I'm just trying to like wrap my head around everything. But if you had to come up with just one thing that you learned, one thing that you recognized that you didn't necessarily know beforehand, or maybe just hadn't even considered beforehand, but now going out this entire process from accident to recovery to living life now, what would be that like one big thing that just really stands out to you?
Dun, dun, dun. Good one. It's like what I think and what I know are two different things. Like what my heart says is like, honestly, like kind of going into things with more grace, like kind of being more accepting of where other people are, because I had an advantage in a way. And it was really hard for me to accept that in other people when I just felt like, oh my gosh, you're being so like, it's just like, oh, this isn't realistic. And I think giving other people grace wherever they are in that family dynamic or in that journey is really important, and acknowledging that and trying to accept that. And I can say that that was a huge challenge for me. And in some weird ways, it still kind of is, you know what I mean? Like, so I think just giving grace is probably key for me in that role, in that position. It's going to look different for my brother. It's going to look different for my other sister. It's going to look 100% different for my mom and dad. But for me as a healthcare professional, kind of on the outskirts, but in it, that's what I'd say.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Yeah. I honestly, like, I'm taking it all in, and I'm just at a loss for words for you taking the time to share this part of you, share this part of your journey, and really just be kind of open and honest about your therapy brain, your family brain, your caregiver brain. I mean, all of these different roles that you had to play and to still currently play. It's not even like it happened and now it's over. Like, no, it's this constant thing that's still going on. And I really do. I can't thank you enough for just coming on and sharing everything that you have kind of gone through with this. And I wanted to give you an opportunity that if people wanted to connect with you, find out more about you, because I know that you are up to so many amazing things over there with your podcast and your membership site and all of that. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to give a little shout out to everything you're doing.
Oh, well, first of all, if anybody had somewhat of a similar experience and would love to I don't know, chat or email or connect, I seriously would love it, because I do feel like that's something I wish I would have, because I didn't know any other even healthcare professionals that have had that kind of role. So if anybody even needs to just vent, you can email me. So put that in the show notes, first of all.
Perfect.
Second of all, like Sarah said, I run seniorsflourish.com, which is a website supporting other OT practitioners and level 2 students. Really, really be awesome at being OTs, working with older adults. Specifically, it's kind of all adults, older adult. And I just have a passion for it. Like, I really want people to be inspired, because OT is hard. The profession is hard. Healthcare is hard. And so I really feel like it's important to be able to connect with other people that really want to make a difference and are really striving to do their best, or need some more support. So that's why I also have like the Learning Lab membership, where you can get tons of resources and things at your fingertips, so you can do that and share your own stories and wins and frustrations, and in a more of a supportive environment, which I don't think is always out there in the maybe Facebook group world. And then through the podcast, having conversations like we did today, Sarah, just with other OT practitioners sharing their stories or their expertise, and just really just helping people on their OT journey is so important to me. And so anyway, seniorsflourish.com, Seniors Flourish podcast, Learning Lab membership site. Sarah will have all these in the show notes, because I know how the show notes work. Email me, put that in the show notes, Sarah, if somebody wants. Or Instagram, I'm on Instagram. That's kind of where I like to hang. But yeah, it's one of my favorite things about like online OTs things is connecting with others who I never would have connected with otherwise. So thank you for your platform too. Yeah.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you. But I think it really is. It's all about that support. And I think based on everything that we've kind of been talking about today, just having that support system, having people to talk things through, get resources, all of that kind of stuff. And what you're doing is just, it's so amazing and so supportive for therapists and students that are working with older adults that need that additional support, that just need just a little bit more help and just kind of getting through this OT life that, that we're a part of here.
Yeah.
So my last question.
Yes.
One word to describe occupational therapy. What would it be?
I know. I always like this question. I honestly would say life for so many reasons, and because it can look so different for so many different people. But I really feel we as OT practitioners we strive to help people increase quality of life or live their best life. And so I say life.
I love it. I love it. And I love when people say that word because I'm like, yep.
I know. I know.
I get it.
I know. OT for life, and that's the thing is like, that's actually one of my favorite, I love ending your episodes with that because it's such a unique perspective and how you can have the same word, but it can feel so different. So love it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. 1,000 thank yous for coming on and sharing everything that you did today. I mean, yeah, it was wonderful. And I definitely got a little choked up. I was trying to hold it back as you were opening up about all this. So thank you, Mandy. Truly, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, before you go, I just wanted to say thanks for listening to today's episode. If you want to further the discussion, go to our website, otforlife.com, and join our Facebook group. If you like us, here are 3 easy ways to let us know. 1, share our podcast with a friend, colleague, or anyone interested in occupational therapy. 2, leave us a review on iTunes or anywhere this podcast is found. 3, subscribe to us so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time, OT for Lifers. And we're done. Well, my husband has literally been sitting on the couch over there because I threatened him that he could not make noise because it's so echoey in here.
Yeah. And he gets to listen to a one-sided conversation.
You did so good. What?
I was quieter than you.
Oh,
a little bit, but your water bottle.
Oh, I know. My water makes a lot of noise. So.
Always.
I told him, hi.
But you were, hey, good to see you. Then it feels sometimes I think it feels a little unnatural. I'm like, okay, all right, then here we go. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know. I know exactly. Okay. I was just having a thought in my head about something and I was like, should I do that or should I not? Yes, I'm going to do it.
Case, what do you call it? Not case studies.
Now I'm like, my brain just tanked right there.
There was a lot going on.
There was a lot going on.
So she did that
I'm jumping in again.
No, I could talk about that.
Yeah, I was just sitting there and I'm like, I'm just going to let you talk.
I know. I could probably just sit and talk about it forever. Yeah.
Everything you were saying, you were answering. I'm like, I have this question. And then you'd roll right into it. And I'm like, I don't have that question anymore. Okay. And then you'd talk about something else. I have another. Oh, nope. She already went into it. And I was just like, I'm going to let you talk because what you were saying was just amazing and better than anything that I could have interjected in. So I was just like, you go.
Yeah. Well, and I can talk a lot.
No, you.
Socially deprived, non-clinical worker. I told you that.
Oh, another OT. We could talk about this
all day long.